Welcome back, one and all, and today we're talking about those goddamn pesky libs. And to help us out, we've got fan favourite and returning All-Star champion contributor Baimaii from Free Youth. Baimaii, welcome. How do you do?
Hi, I'm good.
And we've also got Soravis Chayanam, aka Mick, who is a professor in Bangkok associated with Free Youth. And of course, Samai. Samai, how do you do?
I'm alright.
Sounds great, man.
Yeah.
And so before we get started on liberals and liberalism, Mick, you certainly caused a stir in the English language Thai media world when you were interviewed by the Bangkok Post last year, kind of at the height of the protests. And you basically called for full communist revolution in that interview, which was very cool, by the way. And I was just wondering, what was it like for you after that? Because, you know, a lot of the comments, I mean, at least on the Bangkok Post page, were pretty hostile.
It's not much because I really didn't follow the comments, so I didn't really know what people said or the shitstorm that has been going through. But not much not much consequences at all. I suppose, but
you just don't care.
I think maybe a few friends on Facebook unfollowed me or unfriended me or something, but that's about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the worst thing that can happen in the 21st century.
Oh no. So I think to start off, we kind of have to define Thai liberalism. And to do that, we first need to maybe define Thai conservatism, which is obviously the current governing structure of the kingdom. And just for conservatism, I do think that there is a kind of unique branch of conservatism or conservative elitism in Thailand, which to briefly define is kind of the JIP thesis, right? Which is semi-colonial, semi-feudal. The semi-feudal is quite obvious, referring to the power of the monarchy, while the semi-colonial today means the influence of international corporations as well as international financial institutions such as the World Bank and, of course, the US. But so that's Thai conservatism. But is there a branch of liberalism that's unique to Thailand as well? Or is it imported from abroad? Or kind of what are its origins in Thailand?
Would you like to go first, Baimaii?
That's...
At least from maybe from personal experience, maybe. Mm-hmm.
You have the experience too, Mick.
Yeah. I'll
cool.
support you.
The definition of Thai liberalism, that's hard. Well, from my own experience, I see lots of like activist groups. Like some groups only want to talk about like the reform of the monarchy. They want just the current government to be ousted. They just want that. But when we talk like economically, they don't want they said we can wait, we have to change the political system first, and then we can think about the economy system. And when Free Youth last year, did the RT campaign once. I think that was an obvious crack between the leftists and the liberals.
Yeah, I just want to make that clear. That's when you guys came out as openly communists. So.
Yes. So we were very commie, and we were kicked out from many groups. Many groups didn't want to work with us. They were trying to stay away. But because Free Youth was really, really popular at that time, so they wanted to kick us out, but then they couldn't kick us completely. So it was we had a little tension with other groups. Some said we ruined the movement in Thailand. We ruined everything. We make the conservative think that this movement is a communist one. Well, we're communists. You cannot change that. But but as the movement grows, I think more and more people start to talk about the economy, the capitalism more often. For example, when we talked about the communism, the RT, and everything, one professor who is working with like welfare state. He said like he has been like saying about state welfare for a long time, but then when Free Youth talked about the RT thing, most of the comment didn't attack him anymore. They were like, oh, okay, welfare state, okay, that's cool, that sounds nice, don't be communism. Yeah. So yeah.
So it's kind of like you were pushing the Overton window to the left a bit, you know?
Yes. Because like in Thailand, we only like the mainstream of the politics here. We only talk about like Free Youth or the monarchy or just some capitalists, like for example, like the CP capitalists who like support the royal family. I think that is just like what the liberals are against. Like they only like they want just democracy. They want just republic. That's like the very extreme point. That's like the main goal of them. So the difference between us, the communists and the liberals, is like we try to we talk about economy more often than them. Like we want to push our communism, or you can say socialist agenda. Yeah, so we never separate, but many groups say no, just separate. And then there's the rider union guys, the rider union activists. They were like, when the democracy protest was like really low, but then the rider group, they came out and they were very very popular. And I think I don't know if liberals will like think for once that even like they have like another prime minister who is very democratic, but if that new prime minister like doesn't care about the workers, then these people will keep protesting. So yeah. So in our latest protest on 18th July, so riders join us a lot, and other workers group too. Yeah. So we're learning, we're growing, I think.
Yeah, it's great. And Mick, just maybe you could address on a more broader spectrum, like when did liberalism start becoming prevalent in Thai politics? I mean, do we go as far back as Chulalongkorn or maybe 1932? What do you think?
Yeah, it's pretty tough to put it that way. I mean, because socialism might be even stronger back then than right now. I mean, because when Thais talk about democracy, there were at least elements of socialism back then. So this was like before Second World War. This was like leading to the revolution. But my guess, I would say liberalism became very strong. Probably after October 76, 79, probably after October 76, and after the dissolution of the Communist Party. At least they disbanded and they became reintegrated into Thai society, and probably the academia played a probably crucial role in taking the younger generation away from Marxism, away from leftist politics, and toward all the good things, nonviolence, multiculturalism and liberal democracy and diversity and all the keywords that liberals use. So I don't know. The universities, I think, were pretty much de-radicalized after '76, and it became a hotbed for liberalism instead, and more or less it reflects the failure and weakness of the left, of the Marxist left, or the communist left. But I think things are maybe slowly turning around a bit, maybe in the last few years, perhaps. But maybe just to add on what Baimaii said, I'm from experience at least, I don't really see anything that unique about Thai liberals. I don't know, but you guys can you guys can argue with me later, but from experience, I mean, I don't know. I think they hate communism, they hate socialism, they hate Marxism, like liberals.
They hate us.
I mean, shit. I mean, they hate us, and definitely. I mean, communism is just left wing totalitarianism. Right? Marxism are. No, Marxists, are class reductionists. They reduce everything to class, and they don't care about gender, race, sexuality, ethnicity, and the rest. And they're not anti-capitalist, definitely, right? Like liberals abroad, they're pretty happy with capitalism. The best liberals perhaps might want to regulate capitalism, but on the whole, they're not anti-capitalist at all. They are happy with capitalism. They're happy with electoral democracy, and as Baimaii said, the ones that I encountered, they tended to separate politics from economics completely, because the problem is with politics, not with the economy, not with capitalism. Our problem is because the government is corrupt, authoritarian, which of course is true, but still that's just the tip of the iceberg or something. So the problem is with politics, not with capitalism. Our bad government, corruption, or the problem is for liberals. The problem might be, of course, in the military, royalism, nationalism, the middle class. That's like a favorite target. We need, and therefore their solutions are more or less pretty much moderate, like gradual, incrementalist. We need a new constitution that is more democratic, whatever. We need free media, which of course, we need better education. We need charity, helping each other, more foundations. But I think like liberals abroad, they are defined by this great trust or faith in like capitalism and electoral democracy, and the parliament system, and therefore their solutions are the usual things that we hear, morality, electoral democracy, free media, education, and the rest. And so in the Thai case, what's added is probably this emphasis on the law, on the constitution, on human rights. But I think on the whole, we're still within more or less the liberal, the global liberal framework, if there's such a thing.
I would say I actually completely agree. I don't think there is anything particularly unique about Thai liberalism at all. Samai?
Yeah. As we were talking about before the show, liberalism is because it's just a collection of ideas, and therefore it's the same the world over. It just has a little bit of a context in wherever it is. So we're against the elites. Well, not the elites. Sorry, we're against certain types of elites. Well, they're different people in different parts of the world. We're against really bad poverty. Well, poverty rates are different around the world. Rather than trying to break down society into its constituent sort of economic mode of production, what implications does this have on the political system, on the cultural system, and how does it perpetuate itself? It's all just about how many of the keywords and buzzwords that Mick mentioned earlier can we tick off and say we've covered them, right? We've covered civil rights. We've done that one. We don't have to come back to it again. There is no relationship between economic coercion and people not being employed because of their race. There's no such thing. And as long as it's written in the law, we're fine. So I definitely think that a lot of Thai liberals, a lot of Thai members of the activist circles, I think I mentioned this in the Isan episode. They're all like that. They're all talking about all these important things, but they refuse to go a bit further and see how the truth in Thailand is a bit more, and the whole world over. The truth is a bit more, based in how the economic system perpetuates these political problems, because they again refuse to see everything from a holistic point of view. And that's mostly important. Yeah.
Yeah. I think The liberals I've run across, they actually talk about class, but they turn class into a kind of identity.
Cultural
So
identity.
the class becomes class becomes an identity part of identity politics. Class is at the same level as race, gender, sexuality, but class becomes like a lifestyle issue. How much does your lunch cost, or what brands do you use, or you can't be using an iPhone if you're a communist, and so on and so forth. But so I mean it's totally crazy. I mean why do you have to tie luxury, for instance, comfort and luxury to capitalism? Like it's like blackmailing you. Like it's like blackmailing you. If you want comfort in life, if you want a modicum of luxury, then you have to accept capitalist exploitation and inequality. That's totally absurd. There's such a thing as socialist luxury. There's such a thing as communal luxury, right? There's even a fully automated luxury communism. Fuck you, right? So I mean, why do you associate luxury with socialism and with capitalism? That's totally strange. But here's my point. When class, I think they completely misunderstood class. Because there's such a thing as workers' identity, but the whole point of communism is to overthrow the working class by overthrowing the class system, right? So it's a strange class because unlike gender, unlike race, in identity politics at least, the working class does not want others to recognize and affirm itself. The point is to overthrow the capitalist system so that there's no such thing as working class and capitalist class, for instance. So that's a huge misunderstanding. But when class turns into an identity, then it's really a way of not tackling the class system, because in identity politics, the essence of identity politics is really like a competition of suffering. I mean, like, which group is more oppressed, which group is more victimized, and the whole point is that if you're not part of a group, you cannot understand that group, you cannot speak for that group, you cannot struggle along with that group. For instance, if you're a white guy, white guy, you can't be anti-racist. I mean, impossible. Or like a dude, right? I'm a dude. I can't be pro-feminism, or I can't be anti-patriarchy because I'm a fucking guy. So the whole idea is to subdivide humans into smaller and smaller groups, and there's no solidarity. There's understanding between groups is basically impossible. And that's the whole point of bearing witness. You got to listen to them, work for their recognition, and so on. But there's no such thing as universality. Everyone belongs to certain particular groups, and then no one understands each other more or less. And what's the whole point of politics, which is about cutting across differences? It's completely destroyed, eviscerated, because everything becomes a matter of simply respecting one another, and dividing humans into smaller and smaller groups, which find it more and more difficult to create a certain hegemony or a hegemonic bloc or something.
Yeah. Can I just say we were talked about this as well on the last episode, which is that a lot of this identity politics, you can really see how it's been transplanted out of the West in very recent years. I'm talking the past 5 or 10 years in particular. And it's very interesting. I mean, I'm just basically repeating myself from the last episode, but it's very interesting to see how it's been done, in that most of the people who have brought it back have been highly privileged, elite, middle and upper middle class people who have gone to study abroad in Western universities and have brought it back, typically to Bangkok. And even then, they apply it in a manner where it's only relevant to themselves. So, for example, if you want to do some kind of radical identity politics, they don't talk about, how typically people from Isan are much, much poorer and disadvantaged than the rest of the country, and try and make that an identity. They not to mention other very heavily disenfranchised minorities like Muslims in the Deep South, perhaps, or mountain people who don't have citizenship or anything like that. So I think it shows quite a lot when even when they bring identity politics into Thailand, typically they really don't they don't use it in a way which actually looks at any kind of exploitation, serious exploitation in the country. They use it for the middle class in Bangkok.
Just to add slightly, I'm sorry. I have students who are against Marx because the argument is that, well, Marx is a pretty well-off guy, he's from a well-to-do family, and his wife was pretty, from an aristocratic background, right? And there were, and Engels was fucking a capitalist, and he was rich, and so Marx was a fake, right? So according to this identity, view from the framework of identity politics, Marx was a total fake, right? He was well-to-do, married a rich girl, and supported by a rich friend. And so how could he be talking about a proletariat revolution and all that crap, right? So the point is that only the working class can understand the working class. If you're not from the working class, you can't be supporting them, and you can't understand them, and you can't be fighting alongside them. So that's like the whole point of turning class into a form of identity politics.
I think the ideology, I'm going to call it, of like individualism, there is an importance of identity and being different from other people. That's true, but fundamentally, as social beings, individualism as a hyper sort of pushing on, as Mick mentioned, idpol. Now it's all about, okay, what's your background versus like, what can you see in other people's backgrounds, and how can you create a sense of shared understanding? It like empathy has been removed from the discussion, because now it's more about like turning inwards and seeing how as you mentioned, like it's a competition of how much shit have you taken, as opposed to how much shit have we all taken. Because fundamentally, at the end of the day, there are two types of people, right? There are those who shit, and there are those who get shat on.
Baimaii, could I do a little bit of identity politics here and ask you, from a kind of, since you are a woman, from a kind of identity politics place, like what do you see in kind of liberal feminism that contemporary liberal feminism in Thailand? I mean, how do you interpret it as your understanding of feminism?
I used to work with like a feminist group once, and I didn't like them at all. Like, I don't want to join the protest with them. I mean, I think the problem of Thai feminism is that they are very, like Ajahn Soravis said, they're trying to present themselves as like victims, and present some people who are like more victimized, and they exclusively talking about just women. Like they didn't talk about much about like the LGBTQ and like other gender too. They are very exclusively like about women only, and I don't know, I don't follow them that much because I don't like them. I mean, they said like, oh, they read like the gossip book that I translated, but I don't think they understand. And when they, I don't know, they barely talk about like the economic relationship between like capitalism and women. They only like to present themselves as a woman, like, don't tell me how to dress, like the Me Too thing. And I don't know, I cannot work with them, although like I love like Marxist feminism. I don't know.
I mean, is there any talk about kind of reproductive labor, for example?
No.
No.
No, they only talk about, I don't know, it's strange. They only talk about like, don't tell me how to dress, and the tax on women's pads, but that's all. They don't expand the politics. They're just very like,
it's very like single issue by single issue.
Yeah. I don't want to say much because I don't follow them that much, because I'm not a big fan.
Yeah, I think we need to get Ajahn Gengit on to talk about some
Yes.
of this stuff.
Battling them on a daily basis.
Oh yeah, it's quite fun to watch, I have to say.
Can I do? Okay, so I remember this tweet from Cod Satrusayang, and it was about how there was like a discovery in history that Thai women in the feudal system did own land, and I'm like, why is this good for you?
Well, no, he was like yes queening the women landowners.
Was he being facetious? I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think he was like, awesome, you know.
Yeah,
these women own slaves.
Yeah,
you know?
girls can do it too. So yeah, which is important because as Jit says, it doesn't matter your gender. If it matters if you're a landowner. So you know,
a girl boss is still a fucking boss, right? So
absolutely, absolutely.
Maybe two things. Maybe just one is that I don't know, liberal values that, like diversity. I mean, shit. I mean, of course, it's a good thing, but I don't think liberals really get it. I mean, it's not a value that is of, you know, unambiguous value in itself. I mean, shit. I mean, how diversity. I mean, how many more Prayut do we want, right? How many more reactionary or royalist groups do we want? I mean, shit. So diversity.
Sorry, what? I don't quite get what you mean by that when you say like diversity. Yeah, go ahead.
When liberals advocate for diversity, they treat it as a value that is good in itself. But the point is that how many more diverse right-wing groups do we want? So we don't want more, right? We want less. We want less right-wing groups. We want less fascists. We want less ultra whatever royalists or extremist right-wing groups. Less is better in this case, and we don't want diversity, right? And another point, I don't know. This might be a segue into this issue, but especially because Baimaii is active in the protest scene. But I think liberals here, like liberals abroad, are pretty much obsessed with nonviolence. I mean, this is like their only single tactic to organize. That's like the only way that they know how to make a protest or how to organize a protest. And the bar for nonviolence is very high. I mean there's so many things you can't do at a protest. I mean, you can't throw plastic water bottles at riot police. I mean, why? I mean, you can't spray paint on the whatever. You can't deface a building. You can't destroy property. I've seen them giving flowers to riot police. I mean, why? I mean, I've seen them. You know, it's like it becomes like a contest of, you know, who has the best manner. You know, I mean, I'm polite. Please love me. I mean, that's so nonviolence has become like a major obstacle, impediment to organizing and protesting. I mean, they are against any or every form of more militant action, and that's to me that's something that will imperil the movement in the near future.
As the great liberal philosopher Selena Gomez said, "Kill it with kindness."
I mean, I don't think we can fight state violence with no violence. That's the point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're more like pacifists. I think they're not like non-violent. I mean, it's I work with lots of like liberals, and they all said like, if we want to protest, we have to be responsible for everything. We have to be responsible for the violence that will happen in the protest. We have to be responsible for the injured. We have to be responsible for perhaps the new cluster that happened in the protest. And I was like,
the COVID outbreak.
Yeah, if you want to be responsible, don't protest, okay? Just, you know, stay home and stay safe in your little home. and don't ever
And
go
tweet.
out to protest. Yeah.
That's a bit of weird cognitive dissonance, don't you think? Because, like, you know, for liberals, it's all about you individual choices, right? So it's your choice to go out and protest. But then now all of a sudden there's something about social responsibility going on. It's like, where was this when we were talking about the system crushing us by the boot? I mean, I don't know. It just sounds like there's a bit of a disconnect there. And I was going to say, like, the world over, customs and traditions have been created to reduce the amount of backlash that the underclass gives towards the ruling class, and it just happens to have like different manifestations in different places. In Thailand, it's about respect, right? You know, it's about, oh, we have to, you know, they try to attach a positive value to what is essentially something that doesn't have a positive impact, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I think for me what's interesting is that with leftist thought, there is a very clear roadmap to change in almost every situation, which is, look, we are the people that we recognize that we, the working class, are the people that our labor creates wealth for the elites that run our society, so we can withdraw our labor, we can withhold it, and that way we can get some power or get some crumbs, if you like, from welfare or something, which we can talk about later. But the liberal idea of change seems to be, in Thailand, very much so, and as well across the world, we're going to ask very, very, very nicely. And if you say no, we will ask you very, very nicely again. And this doesn't seem like a very winning strategy, as you said. Baimaii, I'm just kind of wondering, like, when you have these meetings with these other liberal groups, what kind of attitude do they take to you? Because I remember when we talked a few days ago, and you said, you were shocked when you said you proposed for the guidelines for the protest, a little bit of violence is okay, and they said, yeah. I mean, do you think that's shifting at all, or like what kind of reactions do you get from them when you talk about this stuff?
I think it's the bar of the nonviolence shifts a little since we did the radium protest. I think radium protest kind of, while other liberals were very, very, very peaceful and everything, and the radium were like fight against the police, and I think liberals started to realize, because their protests, not many people joined them. I mean, okay, it could be like, I don't know, a part of, it could be because like the Free Youth Facebook page is very popular, but it could be it could be that the people are bored of it. Like they came to protest. They wanted to fight, not just sit and listen to someone speaking. They want action. They want to release their anger and everything. And yes,
I mean, fighting the police is very, very fun. It's an exciting and fun thing to do.
And it's like one of the thing that is like is an action that is against the state very directly. And then on the 18th of July, when we thought, yeah, we wanted to protest and everything, we tried to talk with other groups, because we cannot do it alone, as we want the movement to be big. But at that time, we didn't hope much. We thought like, oh, there will be just us do the protest. But surprisingly, many groups agreed to join us. But actually, there were moments that they wanted to stop, like they didn't want to protest anymore when the COVID was like really high and the government said that they would lock down. But thanks to a Marxist doctor, he joined the meeting too, and then he was like, everything is already fucked up. You have to protest. You cannot like wait until the COVID is a bit lower and then you go to protest. And that doctor, I'm very thankful.
That wasn't Patton the other host of this podcast, by the way. No, I'm sure he would say the same, but it wasn't him.
That's his friend. No, we need more Marxist doctors. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and liberals listened to the Marxist doctor, and they were like, okay, we will protest and we will do everything. And yes, and I think There were some misunderstanding when we did the redeem, because like the other groups, they thought like we incite the violence. They thought like we started the violence. I mean, although it was obvious that the police started violence and everything, but then they joined us, and then on the protest of 18 July, they began to understand that, oh, the violence actually started from the state, not the protesters. I was like, oh, it took you like
shit.
almost a year to understand everything, and they were like, okay, let's shift the bar a little. But anyway, there are some groups that they don't wanna get in with any violence. They are very, very pacifist.
Yeah, they were the group that opposed burning anything, right? Even burning some dolls in effigy, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we're trying to expand the bar of their non-violence thing.
You can't burn those dolls, man. That's going to contribute to carbon emissions.
Oh yeah, significantly. Doesn't matter that the Gulf of Mexico is on fire. So I was going to move on a little bit to talk about maybe something a little bit divisive on the left in Thailand, which is the discourse about the welfare state, which obviously is a vaguely liberal thing it is a liberal thing. However, those on the left seem to, I think it's kind of like 50-50 as to people who very much advocate it and for people who do not. So, I mean, some of us see it as maybe like a crumb or a concession for workers or for the public to kind of impede any kind of real emancipatory change like revolution, whereas others say, okay, look, we will take the crumb. Can we have the crumb? Or maybe it's something a bit better than a crumb, depending on the situation. But I just wonder where you guys kind of stand on that. I know Baimaii, you've kind of advocated for some welfare state like reform. Mick, maybe a little bit less so. So I guess the question is like, do you think advocating for a welfare state is a progressive action as opposed to advocating solely for revolution?
I don't. It depends on whether we see welfare state or some form of social democracy as the endpoint, or as a transition to something greater, or as a transition to post-capitalism, because some liberals that I know can accept or even are advocating for the welfare state because it would help reduce class antagonism and many are, and some are even talking about UBI and so on and so forth. But hey, I mean, even billionaires like Bill Gates and stuff whoever, many billionaires are also advocating for UBI because that would help, as I said, help minimize or help diffuse social antagonism. So my point is simply that I'm fine with social democracy. I'm fine with the welfare state if it's like if it will help empower the working class, raise their standard of living, increase their rights, but we have to see it as part of a reformist policy that would ultimately feed into the drive towards post-capitalism. So it can be what they call a revolutionary reforms, right? So it can be like a revolutionary reform. Another point is probably that I don't even think that we at this moment with the power balance and these forces in society at present, I don't think we can even have a welfare state. I mean, the working class is totally disorganized. Labor unions are pretty much weak and or non-existent. I can't form a union at my university, for instance, identity politics, the dominance of liberal ideas, and we explain everything through human rights framework and the rest. And so I don't think that the present juncture is really, is right for even having a a degree of a welfare state or
So what is it? What is it right for then?
Maybe.
Maybe, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe just some window dressing policies for political parties to advocate. I mean to promote in the next election, whenever that is. But there's nothing much of, because I know some professors and I know the group that's working hard on promoting welfare and welfareism and that's great, but I don't know, the balance of force in society is not right yet, and two, I'm not sure how far they want to go. I mean, is that their end point, or do they want to go further? That's a point that I'm not sure yet. But if it's like a transition to something grander, if it's a transition to some revolution or a post-capitalist society, yeah, why not? But I'm pretty pessimistic right now. I think it probably might be used to obstruct any form of post-capitalism. That's my pessimism.
Baimaii, do you agree at all? Or, I mean, and I guess a follow-up question would be, what should we be advocating for right now? If not for, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we actually opened the RT campaign last year, and I think that's our goal. But when we want to talk about communism or the new fair form of society, and I think when we use the word welfare, people get it. Like, people won't get it if, okay, this is communism, that is communism. When we wanted to communicate with lots and lots of people, I think the word welfare, they kind of get it. They don't get it if it says something very academically. So yeah, it's just the use of word. And for now, I only support welfare if it has like a core of class struggles. Without core struggles, I'm not for it. Without the core of class struggle, I'm very against. When we're,
and what does that look like when it has a core of class struggle?
When it has a core of class struggle, well, they have to talk about tax the rich. They have to talk about how capitalists oppress you. They have to talk about capitalism. Well, the Rider Union on their Facebook page, I think they do it very, very well. They attack the capitalists like every single day, and I think that's kind of cool. They don't want to be like, oh, I'm just, I just want to ask for more welfare. They're like, no, capitalists are bad. This is the workers who do like all the work and who make all the wealth, but they don't get all the wealth. Yeah, so on their Facebook page, I think it's very cool. They attack capitalists more often than us, and and surprisingly, like, they receive very positive feedback. But when we talked about RT last year, we were attacked like deadly.
Because they were doing an IPOL attack because you're privileged middle class students and they're poor workers. So
it was the hammer and sickle thing as well.
Yeah.
Everyone was all about the. Oh.
You just need like a pair of like fingerless gloves and a delivery bag instead of the hammer and sickle.
Yes, and I think the RT campaign from the last year, I think it helped building the leftist group in Thailand, because after we opened that campaign, there were many other leftists happening in Thailand. Like, there were like some groups that want to work with us. There were some groups that wanna put like the workers on the table, and I think it still helped. And actually, in every post we attack capitalism, but we just don't put the RT symbol on the picture. And
You just change the aesthetic.
yeah, and just that. And when it's quite funny, like what I post, what I write with the what I write in the RT post and what I write in other posts without like being hashtag RT. Many people are very like, they are very opening. They are very
More receptive to your
yeah
ideas.
It's very strange. I don't know, they're still scared of communism. They're like
Yeah,
in
just
Thailand.
don't call it communism.
Yeah,
Better
just
luck
don't
with
call
the
it
Seri Thai
communism.
logo.
Yeah.
I know like 2 labor activists, or even like 2 union leaders who are, you know, fighting for the welfare state and so on. And but their whole point is that for us to have a welfare state, we need a strong and growing economy. So the whole point is that as long as the capitalist class is happy, as long as the economy is growing, then all the profits would feed into the welfare state and, you know, enable workers to have a better livelihood. But so in this sense, there's a certain, I think there's a wing or there's at least a group in activists who are working for the welfare state that's actually protecting democracy, not democracy, capitalism. That's because they tie their future and their future well-being to economic growth, to the growth of capital. And so that's a group that I'm not sure how powerful they are, but they certainly have a presence in the movement for welfare state.
So just to go back to, you know, liberalism more directly, and kind of the last thing I have on this, which is Mick, you've spent your career working in academia, which is, you know, like it or not, it's highly liberalized in Thailand. We can definitely say, particularly in the universities like Chulalongkorn and Thammasat, the big ones. What kind of issues have you faced coming up against the kind of academic liberalism prevalent in these institutions?
Well, I think I teach political science, and so I think it can be, as in most or as in other universities, I think there are probably 2 dominant poles: the conservatives and the liberals, and leftists are probably, you know, a minority, 1 or 2 or maybe a few in each department or in each faculty. From my experience, well, I think I'm pretty fortunate because I haven't experienced that much yet from my colleagues, and the newer or the younger generation of my colleagues they are more openly leftist, and than the older ones, and so that's a pretty good sign. So yeah, I at least for now, I'm not sure about in the future, but at least for now, there's, in terms of teaching, in terms of writing and researching, there's no prohibition on you know, producing leftist literature, or on teaching what I'm passionate about or what I feel is important.
Do you think that there's a relationship between sort of what the current climate in Thailand is like, how that might have impacted people being younger people being more openly sort of interested in these left-wing ideas, and do you think that that you know, it bodes well for, you know, in 5 years or so, or whatever, 10 years?
Yeah. That's an interesting question, because at least the generation that I'm teaching, they are born into capitalist realism. There's like socialism is more or less dead for them, and they spent at least more than half of their lives under a military dictatorship, or quasi dictatorship, but I think on the whole, most in fact aren't able to distinguish between left and liberal. I think at best the education system in this country can only produce liberals, because the education is very conservative, and then do high school and elementary high school and whatever, and when dissatisfied students become liberals, and only maybe later at the university level, for instance, that they are more exposed to more leftist ideas or literature. So I'm pretty okay if they started off as liberals. And the whole idea is to try to co-opt them, is to try to bring them over. But I because you can't really expect much from the education system in this country.
I just think that's quite funny. Like, that's like a conservative's wet dream, is to hear you actually say that out loud, that the aim is to co-opt them, They're like, I knew it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to get them young or whatever. So also that I think when they are exposed to the ideas of the liberal academia or liberal academics, especially the famous ones, and then I'm not sure, but for me I think it helps in a sense that it's easier for them now to see the limitations of liberal analysis and liberal interpretations, and then and then the task is easier. Then I just have to introduce them that, hey, wait a minute here, let's use your liberal framework as a starting point, and then we try to go beyond it, and then we try to go further, because it has so much limitations. For instance, conception of freedom, conception of blah blah blah. So for me that's I don't mind them reading all the or being fans of all the big names in the liberal intellectual world, because I think ultimately it's easier to teach them, or it's easier to turn them into or to expose them to leftist ideas.
For everyone playing Marxist bingo at home, Mick has just ticked off both the law of the passage of quantitative into qualitative and the negation of negation. Mm-hmm. So that's 5 in a row.
So actually, Baimaii, you were one of these young people that was co-opted by people like by professors like Mick.
Actually, I'm one of the students that Ajahn Mick talked about. I mean, he said that I was liberal at first, and then like I grew leftist. I wasn't grew leftist. He co-opted me. He brainwashed me. Yeah, into a leftist. Though I thought at that time I was a leftist, but yeah, he just told me like not long ago, like I was a liberal. But I thought I was
in relation
a
to everyone else, you were probably quite far left. But yeah,
I mean, what did that kind of look like for you in terms of like what was that journey like for you?
For me, well, when I was in high school, I was an exchange student, and I went into a country that socialists won. Is Uruguay, and the president at that time was Jose Mujica when I was there. And I liked the country so much, like because like everything was free, like the education is free,
weed is legal.
The hospital is free, weed is legal, and everything was free. Like in Thailand, when you wanna take ballet lessons or piano, it's a very expensive thing to do here in Thailand, but
it's an elitist pastime. Hobby.
Yeah, but in Uruguay, it's free. Everything is free. You can take ballet class free from the government. You can learn like piano lesson free from the government too. You can like everything was free, and I liked it very much. And then people at my age, they talk about like socialism. They talk about the because the president like is a very leftist. So this is the country that the leftist government do. It's so yes, I started from that. I thought, I love socialism is like that. But then when I went back to Thailand, and when I talk about socialism, people at my age like no. Yeah, they were. I didn't actually. I was so young that I didn't know they were like a thing that called race scare. I didn't know. I mean, at that time, I thought like socialism is very acceptable. It must be a good thing. But then when I like went back to Thailand and then I got into the university and like most professors says like no, communism is very bad. They have like a very very bad history. But then Ajahn Soravis, Ajahn Mick, who was like, no, it's good. It was like, it's cool. It's a cool project. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll listen to you. Yeah,
so we just need to send all Thai exchange students, all Thai students, I guess, to Uruguay.
I mean, you know, according to the liberal indices of the HDI, they're very good. So, like, even by liberal standards, Uruguay is going fine. Like,
yes,
it's madness that, you know, people would ever say, "Oh no, it's not going to work." But to tie it back to the things we were talking about before, Uruguay would be like, in my opinion, like an example of the stepping stone, right? Like if we were to get a outwardly like out there socialist party in government, then I would accept a workers a welfare state, but I wouldn't
like a Corbyn style.
I wouldn't accept a Bismarck welfare state, because, you know, the first welfare state was famously German, but they were definitely not like socialists.
So just to cap things off, I think Samai has prepared a reading series for us.
Indeed, and today is the first instance of this reading. This week's reading is from none other than friend of the show, Kod Satrusayan.
Good friend of the show. A kind of mentor.
Yeah, we learned everything about, you know,
I've studied his work,
which is why we don't do any of the things he does. So Kod is the editor-in-chief of the Thai Inquirer, a lecturer at Mahidol, they'll let anyone go there, and a partner in a consulting firm, right? A consulting firm that has a former Air Force Major General as a senior advisor.
So Mr. always shitting on the military actually has some friends. Has some friends in the military.
But they're retired. It's okay.
They're retired? Oh, there's no conflict of interest. I take it back.
So we're looking at one of his famous opinion pieces, my favorite opinion piece, which is called "It is time for the students to embrace conservatism and not modern liberalism." So I'm gonna share my screen.
Well, let's do a big old. There's a big old interesting conception of what liberalism is according to Kod.
Yeah.
So
hang on. How do I share my screen? For the past 5 months, Thailand students have taken to the streets to demand change. They have called.
So this is last year.
They've called on the government and the military-appointed Senate to resign, and they've called for an end to military intervention in politics. At times, the students have touched on taboo subjects previously unimaginable in the Thai political discourse. Their bravery and their ideals cannot be questioned, as they have brought into debate subjects that sorely need discussing. I mean, you know, this is
lovely.
This is
okay,
fine,
good.
Fine.
Let's keep it going.
But what the students have not touched upon is what happens if all their demands are met. I mean, I wrote about this, but I don't think he has the same idea. What happens if they get what they want? Their ideas for the future have been vague at best, with familiar and important talking points about equality and democracy. Okay, so far I'm on board with what you're saying. Might I suggest then, in a country like Thailand, an embrace of Western-style conservatism?
Yes!
Sorry, say that again.
We'd love to see it.
Hear me out. Conservatism here should be defined not in the Thai context of student lynching and communism hating, but rather Western-style conservatism. That, you know, the relationship between conservatism in this country and student lynching and anti-communism doesn't exist, because we're having a different type of conservatism. All right, well, let me hear you out. This is the idea that governments should be limited, that the free market should be desired, and that personal liberty is paramount in the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so my guy has read John Locke once, basically, and has decided...
I don't think he has. When we keep reading, he clearly hasn't.
He's a history student. He went to Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Ideal for Thailand. There are many reasons why the Westminster or Reagan-style conservatism is well suited for Thailand. But the most important reason is our widespread corruption. Right, so this is the most important thing. Corruption, as opposed to, you know, poverty, as opposed to transgression on civil rights.
Injustices of capital.
Exactly. As opposed to climate change, as opposed to ethnic groups being shat on. Okay, fine. Understand. because, again, we only focus on politics. What better way to combat this than to shrink the national budget and get rid of government-run initiatives that have become a feeding frenzy for corrupt politicians? Western conservatism argues that the government is the root of the most evil of most evils, and the less government interference there is in the daily affairs of its citizens, the better off the country will be. While the privatization of industry and infrastructure is never ideal, and problems have arisen in the United Kingdom and the US from such attempts, it is much better than giving the keys of major projects to the government.
I think the first point is that his conservatives' emphasis on freedom is actually a reactionary form of freedom. Because individual freedom, well, the conservatives got smarter. Instead of opposing freedom or individual freedom, they tried to co-opt it instead, and try to individualize freedom. This was like a probably reaction against like the French Revolution, for instance. And so instead of saying, "Oh, we are against freedom," they try to redefine freedom, and by individualizing it, what Isaiah Berlin calls negative freedom, freedom from government, freedom from being interfered with, and so on. So, but this kind of freedom is completely reactionary, and we must understand this freedom in this light. And a second point is that Reagan-style conservatism, man, that's fucking neoliberalism, right?
It's liberalism.
That's the thing.
At the beginning, he says the Thai students should reject.
Later
Whatever.
on, he'll mention that. Yeah.
We'll get to it.
Yeah, fuck, why call it conservatism? I mean, that is fucking something new. That's neoliberalism. And I think he doesn't understand neoliberalism or the conservatism that he's advocating for, because ultimately neoliberalism doesn't mean the absence of state or a weak state. Neoliberalism requires a strong state to protect the interest of capital, requires a strong state to defend capital from popular protests and the popular will. In other words, defend the interest of capital from democracy, and from other popular movements and so on. And so I don't know. I think he's just throwing out his ideas. Don't really.
It's rhetoric. It's rhetoric. And I think another thing is that he's just buying. He is one of the biggest victims of capitalist realism I've ever seen.
Oh yeah.
He's saying the government is inherently not capitalist. Yes, capitalist realism, but also Thai political realism, in the sense that the government will always be this big bad, as opposed to the government being a tool that is in the hands of whoever is the ruling class. He doesn't get that, and theoretically, when the revolution comes, and that there is that establishment of a group of worker-oriented individuals in control of the government.
ML hours out here.
Stop it! The state apparatus can then be used for not it protecting the interests of capital. Maybe that's possible. If he wants to say that the only way we can reduce corruption is by reducing government aid to other things, by slashing the budget, then clearly he's not as concerned about the interests of certain groups of people, the working class.
I mean, he's also put the cart right in front of the horse there as well.
We're going to fix the politics before the economy, even though base and superstructure has no meaning, apparently. All right, let's
keep going.
We have seen where that road leads. The politicians will have no qualms selling our projects and giving our tax money to the bidder willing to give them the biggest cut or kickback. At least with private companies, they are beholden to competition and the bottom line. He clearly hasn't met CP. But then he goes on to talk about CP, I think. Because, no, it's not capitalism that we see in Thailand. It's crony capitalism, or whatever he calls it. Right. Competition and the free market is a good thing. One of the biggest hindrances to economic development in Thailand is the presence of oligarchies and monopolies controlling multiple sectors of the economy. Much has been written and said about the so-called 20 families that control everything business-related. It is no secret who grants the concessions that allow these monopolies to occur and take place. Ask any would-be duty-free competitor how embedded the current business in charge of duty-free monopoly is with the ruling government and the conservative institutions. The free market that is embraced and loved by Western conservatism is not only ideal in Thailand, it is necessary for the country to progress. The free market means getting rid of concessions and special allowances and opening up the market to competition. Again, it's the focus on this idea of capitalism is this thing that we do not have because what we have is a different type of capitalism, which is definitely not the same argument that we shit on the leftists for saying, oh, it's not real communism. But yeah, again, I don't exactly know how this guy has studied history and not understood the tendency towards monopolization and the manifestation of state monopoly.
He definitely hasn't heard of Facebook or Amazon or Google.
Clearly not.
He's like a typical liberals here in Thailand that only attack like monopoly capitalism. I mean, it's like it's very typical for liberals here to attack the monarchy as like the monopoly, the big capitalists who monopolize the market in Thailand.
Yeah.
So the problem is with capitalists or individual capitalists, and not with capitalism in general. And this position is simply calling for more capitalism. More capitalism, please.
It's just replacing who's in charge as opposed to reconfiguring the whole thing. All right. Okay. Where are we? It would also mean, once and for all, getting rid of state-owned enterprises that are poorly run and letting them live or die by the market. Yes, neoliberalism, the thing that bails out big companies, has always, let things live and die by the market. Companies like SCG, Thai Airways, and Bototo will be beholden to only their shareholders and not subject to government interference.
Well, I mean, the other thing is that it doesn't seem to have this conception that it's actually under, this capital parliamentary system. It is the government's job is to make capital run nice and smoothly for those who own capital, right? Like that is the only job of government as it pretty much exists in most capitalist
Yeah, and so
countries.
to remove it would just cause more turmoil for the capitalists. It's
probably
going to
would,
be
yeah.
It's going to be the wild frickin' West.
Okay, quick pause. So I'm sorry, Mick. What did you say? This is the ideology that he's talking about. What's the name of this ideology?
That word, the neoliberalism.
Okay, so the next header is an argument about neoliberalism. So, please continue.
All these arguments previously laid out make for a compelling case for the embrace of Western conservatism in Thailand. But if one more argument needs to be made, then it is the shape that modern neoliberalism has taken in the West. The safe space, fragile discourse that has come to dominate the political space in the West has no place for a country trying to embrace the Enlightenment values of free thought, reason, and criticism. We cannot have the government mandating values and telling us how to run everything from concert orchestra auditions to college admission offices. We must not let the same echoes of inequality masking itself as equality reverberate in our own country. Neoliberalists...
Wait, my favorite. This is my favorite.
You ready?
The next.
Neoliberalists will have governments interfering and intervening in everything, from what values schools should teach to regulation of all industries and businesses.
Pause. Mick, please.
So shit. Do you want no government or do you want more government?
He clearly thinks that like neoliberalism means very liberalism. He doesn't understand that he's advocating for something that's called neoliberalism. I think for him, he thinks neoliberalism means like that, like very liberal people. Like he says he's anti-neoliberalism. Here, neoliberalists will have governments interfering and intervening in everything from what values schools should teach, blah, blah, blah. Like he goes on to talk about how he's anti-neoliberalism. He literally doesn't know what it means.
Okay. In Thailand, we have already seen what happens when the government interferes. An embrace of small governments and free markets offer us an escape from that cycle.
So I think the big question for me is this was addressed to the student protest organizers. Baimaii, are you convinced?
Well, actually, Claude texted me once when we were like very very popular. When we were like, oh, students, oh, the kiddo, go to the streets.
Before you were openly leftist.
And after like we opened the RT campaign, he never texted me again. Like never ever. Actually, he offered help. Like at first, like he offered help and everything, but after the RT stuff, he would never text for you anymore.
Not.
Well, they wrote like 3 articles in 2 days slamming you.
Like, there was RT came out, and then I woke up the next morning, and there were 3 of them. Or there was a couple days after. There was 3 of them.
I don't know. Is the Thai Inquirer a kind of a right-wing libertarian?
No, but that's the thing. There was a response. There was a response to this opinion piece, like by another guy, and he was talking about how this is all false and we should have a welfare state kind of thing, and conservatism he's talking about is actually neoliberalism. So like he's actually so the opinion pieces aren't solely from COD's point of view. Jasmine Chia has a few more progressive things. Like there is a sense of variance and diversity, I guess. But the problem is that he is still the editor-in-chief.
He's the editor-in-chief.
That's a bit...
Well, I think something we should probably understand as well, just to add on to this, is like this kind of, what did he call it? Western conservatism?
Western-style conservatism.
I mean, Western-style conservatism. I mean, that is liberalism, right?
Neoliberalism.
In almost every sense of the word, though. Like, it is a... economically,
you mean you're calling him a liberal? Yeah, he's a liberal.
Yeah, no, he's a liberal, but he thinks he's a Western-style conservative, right?
I'm not even sure what he thinks. I'm pretty sure it's a good reflection of ideological confusion. And my final thoughts for today: liberals are our frenemies.
Okay, Baimaii?
That's it.
That's interesting because actually liberals want to hold hand with us, the communists now. But then I think we'll...
do they?
Yeah, because we're popular. Actually, it's just because we are really really hot.
To sort of paraphrase Jit Pumisak, because when he starts talking about how the middle class has no power and the landlord class had no power, their only power came from the times that they co-opted the sort of anger of the working class and of the peasantry against other people. So what we have to make sure is that whilst we can, work in tandem with liberals to overturn the government, we also have to simultaneously not be sort of sucked in to that, vacuum of liberal thought. So we have to maintain our identity as left-wingers, as Marxist, communist, socialists.
Our identity.
Sorry, I used the word identity. Yeah.
Okay, I think we've got to call it a day. So thank you, Samai, thank you, Baimaii, and thank you, Mick, very much for joining us, and I hope to have you both back on soon.
Okay, pleasure talking to you guys.
Alright, cheerio. And I'm going to stop recording.